Hey there, Ghost and Ghoulies, I want to suck your blood. No, I don't know why I did that. Anyway, it's Halloween 2015. Happy Halloween to you all watching this video. A lot of people take the entire month of October to talk about scary movies, movie monsters, Halloween-themed goodies, and this, that, and the other thing. And I thought I'd actually just sort of condense it down into one video on Halloween, coinciding with a Wicked Flicks I put out earlier today as well, about Little Shop of Horrors. I wanted to talk about my top 5 all-time movie scares. These are scares that weren't just jump cuts in the moment. These are things that actually got deep down into my gut, into my soul, and forever changed my perspective on the world, and has in some ways stuck with me, these fears, to this day, years and years after seeing these films. And so these are just going to be the top 5 that came to mind as far as all-time scares that still resonate with me to this day. And so I'm going to be doing it in countdown fashion. And I'm going to be starting with the film Judgment Night, starring Emilio Estevez, Dennis Leary, and just a bunch of other people, Cuba Gooding Jr., where effectively these guys, they all get in this camper. They're going to be going to a fight, a boxing match in the city, but they get lost along the course of their journey in just like the projects, the worst ghetto part of town, and they end up having to run for their lives. And what really stuck out to me about this film is the chase. I'm going to be revisiting this with my number 1 choice, but the chase in darkness, people who are criminals and stronger than you, who have weapons, and just are out for blood, just want to take your life, rip your life away from you. And there's nowhere you can turn. There's nobody you can turn to. You have to, sort of man up and get the courage up to fight them back, And just being lost in the middle of nowhere, no sort of law enforcement can you rely on in any way, shape, or form. And there's something very primal and visceral about that, being out in unfamiliar territory and being on your own. And even if you have friends with you, how much can you accomplish to people who own that territory, gangs and thugs and things like that are gunning for you? Of course, if you've ever seen the film, you know that it does play out to the benefit of some of the characters, but not all of the characters. Jeremy Piven features in this film, and he's a favorite actor of mine, and he's not long for the wind. We'll just put it that way, in a very shocking sequence that also terrified the hell out of me. So that's my number 5 choice. Coming in at number 4, probably somewhat surprisingly, because you don't immediately think of this as a horror film, but Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And in particular, Khan's little sort of SETI eels, these little sort of bugs that he puts in Chekhov's and Captain Terrell's ears, respectively, in one of the most gross-out, horrifying movie moments for me in my life. And it too is something that has stuck with me. While there is a bug known as an earwig, it's not actually known for climbing into your ear and feasting on your brain like the little creatures do in the film, but it has sort of that, reputation from people not familiar with that kind of bug. And just the idea of the vulnerability of sleep when you're laying in your bed, spiders, bugs of any kind, they could crawl on you, they could find your orifices and try to get in there and bed in there. Stranger things have happened, and more disgusting things have happened, to be sure, in this world. And that was one of those moments where just it sticks with me to this day. Sometimes I actually have to put like a bandana over my head and over my ears and everything, when I'm going to bed, because I'm just like, I don't want anything crawling in there. And then, of course, the overthinker that I am, I'm like, well, they actually want warm, fuzzy places they can embed into. And if I'm covering up my ears and they find their way in there, well, that's perfect for them. Whereas otherwise it would remain open, So that is my number 4 choice. Number 3 is the film The Gate. This was a film basically about these kids who open a portal to hell in their backyard under this tree stump. And just all kinds of havoc breaks loose. And it's a really fun film to watch. Not very scary, even as, like a teenager when I first saw it, and even as an adult. It's a film I love watching. It's very kooky, it's funny, and there are dramatic moments, definitely. But the standout scare comes when I was in my teens when I first saw the film, and there had been talk of one of the construction workers of this kid's house had gone missing when the house was being constructed, and they were kind of poking fun at the idea, well, maybe he was like stuck in a wall somewhere and they wanted to cover it up, whatever it is. And once this sort of demonic portal has been opened, there's a sequence where they're in their basement and suddenly this corpse falls out of the wall. And when they're going to investigate it, it comes alive. It's a proper zombie, and it's trying to attack and eat and kill them and all this kind of stuff. And as a kid watching that, especially with the wood paneling, if I remember correctly, of the walls, the sort of faux wood paneling of this basement, my grandparents had the same exact kind of design for their basement. And when I would go over to their place for the summer and spend the entire summer there, the creaks in the boards of the house and the floors and everything like that, you'd think you heard somebody walking down the hallway. Yeah, I was scared out of my gourds to have something come out of a wall, some body to come out of the wall and then like chase me around the house. And it was properly terrifying to me as a kid. Coming in as my number 2 choice, one of my all-time favorite sort of thriller horror movies, Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the classic that it is, starring Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, and it very much revolves around almost all the way up to the end of the film. I mean, the entirety of the film is a compelling watch, even up to the point where, the twist that comes in the end, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to spoil it for you here, but it involves a corpse and familial relation, we'll just say it there, to the main character, Norman Bates. And there's this very dramatic, when the sister character of Janet Leigh's character is looking for her at the Bates Motel, and she goes into Norman's house. She's in sort of the fruit cellar, and she turns around this rocking chair. How it turns around, I'm not exactly sure. It didn't look like it was a revolving chair. But in any case, they revolve it around, and they reveal the grotesque skull face of this familial relation. And it just, I almost wept myself. It was that stark, that bold, and I was actually watching it for the very first time at my grandparents' farm in the basement, so I already had fears of things like the gate and, zombies falling out of the walls and whatever like that. Perfect timing to be watching Psycho for the first time at like midnight to 1 a.m., in this basement, the only light in the entirety of it being emitted from the black and white of the TV screen. And I was just like, yep, nope, we're done. I didn't revisit it until probably the mid-afternoon of the next day. And then I found out, there was only like a few minutes left after that of the film. But it still scared the living hell out of me. That was one of those things where just like the vulnerability, again, of being in unfamiliar territory, it's kind of a running theme with a lot of these choices, except for the, SETI eel. But what you have as my number 1 is the pinnacle of these themes. The chase, unfamiliar territory, in the darkness, being alone and vulnerable, even being amongst people. You're still alone. Everyone's fending for themselves. George Romero's original classic, Night of the Living Dead. This movie especially, anytime I go out after hours, even during the day though, I can get it into my mind like zombies, they'll be out day or night. There is a Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, whatever like that. So it's not impossible. It's not only strictly nighttime. But nighttime is one of those times where I have one of 2 mental aesthetics that will play out as I'm going out after dark. One is a callback to sort of the Sherlock Holmes Victorian London era, where it's very intriguing and mysterious, enigmatic, and very much, sort of seductive, the idea of walking out after hours. People are in bed, you're alone with yourself, you can look up at the stars, you can just take your time, you don't have to be in a rush. There is no impact on you. But then there's the other side, and that's very much the Night of the Living Dead, the Judgment Night, the Gate, and the Psycho kind of aesthetic, where you're alone, you're vulnerable, anything can jump out at the shadows and be chasing after you. And in the case of Night of the Living Dead, it's very much a slow and methodical, yet no less vicious, bloodthirsty, blood-curdling chase that ensues. You are, of all your faculties, they're at their pitch, and you can be running, you can be getting weapons, you can be using torches and all these kinds of things. And those zombies are machines that, unless you, like, cut their heads off, they will not stop. They will never stop. They will constantly be at your coattails, at your foothills. And I challenge anyone to watch that film and to be out at night. Anyone who doesn't have this sense of bravado, a chip on their shoulder, like they have something to prove, male, female, anything in between, I challenge you to watch a film like that and then go out at night and not have even the most fleeting thought, what could be out there? What dangers could be lurking behind that fence? Could somebody jump out when I walk past that next tree and try to mug me, try to go after me? These are things that are very primal, very visceral, that have lasted with me because they are very real-world aesthetics to fear. They go back to sort of the, earliest of mankind, the Neanderthal and, all those kinds of things where we were cavemen, cave persons, whatever you want to call it, and we were fending off against jungle animals in the jungle. We were fending off against bugs and all these things, other tribes, and it's something that is inherent in our genetic code, just in our DNA, is the reactive fear. Through the course of our evolution, it's ever present. Yes, there are things that we evolve, we evolve our intellect and all these kinds of things that tell us logic dictates otherwise to a point. But then you look at the news and the world is mad. There's more madness than all of Wonderland that Alice would step through the looking glass to visit, and all of, with the exception again of the Seti eel, which is just sort of, unnerving, all of these other choices very much explicitly do they exploit that fear of being alone, being vulnerable, being, at the hands of somebody who is chasing after you and wants to put an end to you or wants to do harm to you. And maybe you're not capable of standing toe-to-toe with that. In the case of Night of the Living Dead, anyone who's ever seen the film, it does not end happily for any of those characters, the main characters in the film. And you could say that is similarly arguable with the rest of the films, on this particular top 5 list. But, yeah, those are really my all-time movie scares. I'm not somebody who's ever really scared easily. I don't like the realistic gore and things like that. That can unsettle me. More traditional shock value gore and those kinds of things, I don't really get into that genre of horror. When it comes to horror, I'm much more about the classics. And I can even add sort of an honorable mention is the film House on Haunted Hill, the original starring Vincent Price. There are themes in that particular film that are very much in line with what I'm talking about. In this case, you have a group of characters who are challenged. Will they stay overnight in this purportedly haunted house with a host? They're all given weapons, and there's a head that's floating around and everything. It's said that there have been many murders in this house, so it's rife with spirits, and it's a psychological thriller that also has heavy horror elements to it. And while it's not as impactful as some of the rest of the films on this list for me personally, as far as being just resonating all time, it's still one of those that, because of its classic black and white 1950s sort of look and feel, it stands the test of time for me. And to this day, as I say, they are still very much resonant in my psyche, in my emotions. If I dwell too deeply on them, I may not want to leave my apartment for a while, And so yeah, happy Halloween 2015. I'd love to hear from you guys a top 5 list of your all-time favorite movies, scares, or horror films, whatever you want to do, talking about films that just get to the primal fears of life, or maybe even just entertain you, that are off the wall, crazy, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, awesome flick, not very scary, but it's definitely a monster movie, horror movie to a point. Anybody who gets turned into cotton candy, sort of cocooned by that, that's got to scare somebody out there, right? So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. Hope you had a blast and a very safe and happy Halloween, and that'll be it for me on this, so I'll catch you all later. Peace.